Morning everybody, and welcome to the joint presentation by Leeds Civic Trust and Rushbond about the first White Cloth Hall, revealing of the hidden gem. I'll introduce myself. I'm Jenna Strover. I chair the Heritage Watch Group at the Trust, and with me today we have Jonathan Maud, Chairman and Managing Director of Rushbond. We have his colleague, Mark Finch, Director of Real Estate at Rushbond. And we also have Kevin Grady, who some of you will know, former Director of the Trust and Leeds historian. So today we've got a brief agenda. We're going to touch on the history of Rushbond as a company. We're going to talk a bit about who they are and their company ethos. And then we're going to go on to discuss about why they got involved in the first White Cloth Hall, and there's some very interesting images coming up that you'll be able to see of the project as well. So Jonathan and Mark, you're going to show us some images and give us a bit of a flavour and variety of the schemes that you've been involved in over the years. Before we hear about these, could you just tell us something about the origins of Rushbond PLC, please?
Yes, good morning everybody. I suppose the origins aren't terribly grand. I started this business with my mother and an IBM golf ball typewriter 37 years ago, something like that. And I think it was driven historically by an interest in the built environment, a historic love reaching over my lifetime of West Riding mills and churches, and I suppose a creative imagination, really. What I think Rushbond is about is certainly from our perspective it provides us with an opportunity to not only help work and shape the inherited environment, but also to deal with and embrace the people thing, the philosophy and social cohesion and all of those things which these opportunities provide. The first frame that you see there is an early, one of our very early development projects on Clarendon Road in Leeds, and it was from the mid-80s, and I think pretty much our first foray into commercial development in Leeds, shortly followed on by Tower Court, the school that I'm sure many of you from Leeds will know. It was a Leeds School Board school, beautifully designed in the sort of classic format by the council and the city fathers in the late 19th century, and had lain fallow, and we saw an opportunity to repurpose that for offices, as we did the prior building, which had previously been a research and development lab for the University of Leeds on Clarendon Road, with buildings at the back. So it sort of, the excitement evolved really with the creative opportunity to reshape some of the buildings that lain fallow. And I think the truth is that 37 plus years ago, in and around Leeds in particular, it was a very different city. It's hard to believe that large tracts of land were undeveloped. Areas like Boar Lane boarded up in many parts and blackened. And for an enthusiastic lover of the built environment, it was Pandora's box, really. Former Education Board buildings on Carberley Street by the Civic, within the Civic quarter, was a significant redevelopment opportunity for us. This was an unused asset sitting in the heart of the city centre, and provided the opportunity to redevelop the accommodation into some wonderful light workspace, and to provide the lower ground floor into what was a pretty early city bar, occupied by, and we let to Tetleys in those days, I think in the late 80s. We followed on from that with a building diagonally opposite, at the end of Portland Street, a new building with a restaurant and apartments above. The building you're looking at there, the former Education Board building, Grade 2 star listed, provided some considerable challenges, but some fantastic detailing, sculpture, double helix stair, and some amazing details. Here, an opportunity that we worked on with partners, and then disposed of in parts. Centaur House was redeveloped, as you know, as or some will know, as a fairly early city living project, repurposed from one of the many wonderful mills. It was a suiting mill. The Jackson family last occupied, I think, for Centaur fabrics and suitings. And the site to the right, now sporting the wonderful Nuffield Hospital, illustrating perhaps where we were able to interface new with the old within the city core. The Centaur House project, with its basic chassis, was phenomenal in quality, and I think details like the maple floors really did fuel the imagination for some wonderful living accommodation, as well as, again, the natural light that floods in, as often is the case with these former mills. The buildings you see in front of you, Alpha Printworks, again, playing with our ethos of trying to be imaginative and creative about the reuse of existing buildings. This is the picture frame to the top left is the building and the site we bought. It was a former, well, it had been a Printworks, I think, for all of its life. At some stage, I think, was had a royal appointment by Queen Victoria as the largest playing cards factory in the world, and then lay fallow. And we had this idea to repurpose as a college, and fortunately, our ideas and thoughts were embraced by the wonderful Leeds City College, and it is now a really vibrant vocational college, supporting the lives of several thousand students in Leeds. And I think the inspiration for that really was the love of the building, the imagination of how you might feel as a young student in Leeds, taking your granddad on the bus on a Sunday afternoon to show him where you might be studying and working, and how thrilling that must be. It really is a special building, and I think it's that sort of people building soul connection that is so exciting, and Leeds has such a, and the region has such a phenomenal, generous supply of, and that we did enjoy very much working on that project. And in contrast, as we know and knew Tetleys over many years of working with them, so we knew about the former visitor centre at Tetley Brewery Wharf, so that when the site came on the market, we fashioned a mixed-use scheme here. Interestingly, and in comparison, other than the repurposing of the former Tetley Visitor Centre, which you see in part but remodeled on the left-hand frame, was essentially a new build scheme where we were able to shape up an imaginative mixed-use scheme and then embrace partners through our relationship with juries, where a hotel now sits, and Barrett's, the house builders, building with us along the waterfront there. And that's a site that we manage and is currently going through a further transitional stage now, repurposing some of the ground floor leisure units into more workspace. Shortly, a new signature restaurant will be announced in the unit you see on the left-hand side, and looking at adding to and creating a degree more vibrancy in what is quite a large piazza and public space, where we inserted, following a competition, we commissioned an interesting piece of art, steep vessels, and a feature that for those that will be familiar with the sort of work that we try to do is something that we do like to embrace, the opportunity for artistic and creative content within the spaces and the places that we work upon. Now the home to many hundreds of people, of course, and lovely to see it regaining some life after lockdown. Leeds Corn Exchange, a city icon, a city gem, in very much the heart of the area that is so special, and forming the majority of the conversation today in respect to First White Cloth Hall. It's at the other end of Ball Lane, effectively. The two contrasting front-facing and independent elements being Majestic and the very much independent feel that the Corn Exchange and vibe that Kergate gives, that grounded splendour. And this is a building that we've been working on since our ownership over the last few years, and is at the core of a very exciting piece of work in conjunction with Leeds City Council in terms of creating a bigger, softer environment, a piazza effectively, to frame this wonderful building, and provides the opportunity for animation and uses all around and outside of the building, as well as within the splendid space. It very much is a loved building. And then in terms of further contrast and just to show variety, on the frame on the right-hand side is the upper floors of what was the former Beckett's pub in Meanwood, a parade of a pub, a lovely restaurant, and so on, and then apartments on the upper floors sitting in the heart of Meanwood. And then on the left-hand side, in the middle, effectively, that's the front face of Bellevue Mills in Skipton. It's a very large group of mills, repurposed, and now has in occupation North Yorkshire County Council, Creighton District Council, and a variety of offices and homes around a lovely square. Very much a derelict group of mill buildings again, and just at the edge of the centre of Skipton, opposite supermarkets and the station. engages, as all of these projects do, or we try to, strongly within the communities. So all of the projects that you see have been shaped with forming many discussions, the outcome of many discussions with the communities and the amenity groups and planning to try and shape something which has the endorsement of the communities that it'll sit amongst for many years and hopefully be supported by. And also, in particular with regard to the heritage projects, the repurposing projects, provides a sustainable response to the longer term preservation of these assets with soul. The building on the right, just before we turn the page, the Beckett's, was a challenge in that we inherited a building there. It was an old pub that did present some difficulties in remodelling and reuse, and there we did debate a long time whether we could provide something that was of more lasting value and of more significance to the centre of Meanwood, but the new one, and hopefully contributes well.
Are you all right, Mark? Are you having issues with the presentation?
It's fine.
It's just, have you moved on? I don't seem to be able to see them moving on. Maybe it's just me.
All right. Seem to be on the Majestic.
Yeah.
On Majestic.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, it was just a bit of a delay, I think. Thank you.
Yeah.
So here we have the Majestic, a building that we've owned and cherished for an awfully long time, and had a roller coaster ride. It's true to say with this building. We originally bought the building because it was sitting sad, and lonely and unloved in very much the heart of our lovely city, and had been boarded up for many years. And we did a refurbishment of the external parts and found an interesting occupier who was ready to take the building over. And then we had our disastrous fire. And this is effectively hopefully the phoenix from the ashes. This is the home now of Channel 4, national headquarters of Channel 4, and Knight Solicitors. And we have our last accommodation on the ground and lower ground floor, where we are seeking our ideal occupier of that building. I could talk for a long time on the Majestic, Jenna, as I'm sure you know. But what you see in front of you is the result of many thousands of hours of discussions and consultation and partnerships with the city, the community, the Civic Trust, conservationists, heritage experts, and if ever a building spoke to you about the significance of permanence and soul, and a building that we should respect, the Majestic was certainly that, in that the more we connected with people who had such strong memories and affection for the building, the greater our responsibility was for doing something that we hope is going to be long lasting and add value to the entry and the essential city square that it is.
Okay, thanks. We've got everyone in the chat wanting to sort of push on to the first white cloth hall. Mark, so if you don't mind, is it okay if we can just push forward a little bit, please?
Yeah, it's fine. Can you see my slides okay, Jenna?
I think you're a bit in delay, potentially. We're just still seeing
A little bit of a delay.
I think we've got a little bit.
Hopefully you can see the slide, Jenna, of the drawing and sketch of the first white cloth hall.
No, unfortunately, Mark, I think it's you. Where we seem to be dropping out your connection. Do you want to maybe try switching to the PDF rather than the PowerPoint to see if that works any better? Oh, we're at the sketch now. It just seems, I think it's because the file's so big, there seems to be a little bit of a delay.
Very sorry indeed, Jenna, and everyone. I do apologise.
Hey, it's 2021. This is what happens when we're all working from home and remotely. Mark, we're currently on the sketch.
Can you see that slide? Would you like me to bring up the PDF instead?
I'm just wondering if that might be a bit better. It might be a slightly smaller file.
Can you just give me a second then, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, while we're waiting, Jonathan, obviously we're just about to touch on the first white cloth hall. What actually motivated Rushbond to purchase the building?
There's a question. There's a question. Yeah. I think it was. I think the honest answer is other than a great deal of persuasion and encouragement from Dr Kevin Grady, Leeds Civic Trust, and our many friends in and around the region. I think the honest answer is the realization that the significance of the building in the wider context. It isn't just about First White Cloth Hall, although clearly First White Cloth Hall is an imperative, and it's rather like the endangered species. You know, this was the last of the species. So there was a responsibility. I think there are two issues here, Jenna, I suppose, in short. One is the opportunity to add a significant part to a wider context. So from a business perspective, on the basis we take a long-term view, the opportunity for a refocused, represented First White Cloth Hall from a business perspective made good sense. Whether in our lifetime or beyond, it is an imperative that has been clearly holding back the regeneration of Kergate and the street and the life around there for far too long. And the second is that obviously it's from a Leeds history perspective hugely, massively significant, and I think was 5 minutes to midnight being lost. So I think something that we had to do, really.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. How are we getting on, Mark?
I'm just bringing up the PDF file, so just
perfect.
Needs to swap over. If you've got that to hand.
Yeah, 1 second.
Can I say, Jenna, if necessary, we could switch to my computer and I could share my version of the presentation. That might work faster.
Can anybody see that? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, thank you, Jenna. Yep.
No problem. Okay, so we apologies about that, everybody. We'll flick on. Mark, I'll hand over to you. We are at the Modern City Began slide, please.
Okay. Just get your screen up on. So obviously there's, so we talk about, there's got a series of slides. My name is Mark Finch, Director of Estate at Rushbond. So working with Jonathan on this project for, it's effectively 4 years since our particular journey began, 2017. An interesting, challenging, a dynamic journey about how this building can be recreated, rescued, repurposed, and effectively act as a revitalization of what is the city's oldest commercial street, with effectively a new purpose as part of the ongoing revitalization of the Kirkgate community. I'll let you drive the slides then, Jenna.
Yeah, that's fine. We're on to the next one now. You can see it.
So effectively here, Jenna, we're looking back 1923, where you see the two hip bridges showing the outer faces of First White Cloth Hall, infilled with a pitch roof in the centre, so just above the 100 stenciling, where you have the mono pitch roof up to the chimneys, and is obviously an infill. So from 1923, life deteriorated very rapidly, and hopefully the next slide that we'll see perhaps leads neatly into to Dr. Grady's commentary, hopefully.
Absolutely. Kevin, over to you, please. You can give us a bit on this slide.
Right. So, do you want, oh, okay. You could go to full screen, maybe, Jenna. But anyway.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Okay, I think that's fine.
There you go.
Oh, well, anyway. Yes. Oh, right. We're there. Yes. Well, thank you very much. Yes. Yes, I've been associated with the this First White Cloth Hall for many years, and so I was asked to present, you know, the historical background to it. So what you're seeing here is the 1726 John Cussons plan of Leeds. On the left-hand side, we can see Briggate with the marketplace, where the huge cloth hall was held in the huge cloth market was held in the early 18th century at the lower end, where cloth was sold stretched out on trestle tables. And then we see running across the screen Kirkgate, which at this point in 1726 was a very pleasant street running down to the parish church, with imposing merchant houses. The merchants were very wealthy, and some of their houses on Kirkgate were illustrated in the margins of this plan. And then, of course, halfway down the street, towards the centre on the south side, we see apparently a narrow little alley running down to the First White Cloth Hall. And we see on the face of the map what we today would regard as the rear elevation of the building. Now, in 1700, Leeds was a very prosperous market town with a population of around 6,000. It had a large merchant community and was by far the largest and most important market centre for woolen cloth in the West Riding. At this time, the West Riding produced about 1/5 of the country's output of woolen cloth. Now, it's important to grasp that there were two aspects to the cloth made in the West Riding. There was the cloth, the coloured cloth, which was made with wool, which had already been dyed. And then there was white cloth, which was made with wool that was undyed. Now, significantly, the coloured cloth was made in the villages very close to Leeds, that is in places like Hunslet, Armley and Bramley, but the white cloth was made much further away to the northwest and the west of Leeds in an arc which more or less ran between Bradford and Wakefield. Indeed, I suppose that Morley was the closest village to Leeds which actually made the white cloth. So importantly, Leeds was not geographically the natural market centre for the marketing of woolen cloth. Well, in 1710, Wakefield was also a prosperous market town, and although half the size of Leeds, it also had a very important woolen cloth marketing community of merchants. And they decided to try and usurp Leeds as the principal centre of the woolen cloth markets, and it erected its own white cloth hall. Well, of course, this totally shocked the merchants of Leeds, and it is well known Ralph Thoresby, the mayor of Leeds, shot up to Temple Newson to see Lord Irwin and ask him to grant them a piece of land which sat on the south side of Kirkgate, where there were some ancient almshouses, and their intention was to demolish it and build a rival cloth hall there. And this was their approach to seeing off the competition from Wakefield. So the hall went up in a tremendous hurry. It only took 7 months to build it, and it was opened in April 1711. In his famous book Ducatus Leodiensis in 1715, Ralph Thoresby provides a wonderful description of the building. He says, in Kirkgate there is a stately hall for white cloths erected at near £1,000 by certain merchants and tradesmen in the town. And it will sound familiar to you. 'Tis built upon pillars and arches in the form of an exchange with a quadrangular court within. Both the higher and lower stories are replenished with the sort of goods which till this juncture the makers had to carry samples of to each of the merchant houses they dealt with, or these merchants, having trouble upon emergent occasions, had to ride to obtain the cloth in the several townships or hamlets of Eton, Birkinshaw, Bradford Dale, Alverthorpe, Birstall, Littletown, Murfield, etc., etc. And the names of these hamlets and villages were enumerated upon the doors of the distinct repositories where the goods are lodged in the hall till the weekly market upon Tuesday afternoons, of which notice is given significantly by the bell in a beautiful cupola painted and gilt. Well, it was as the result of the erection of this, what we now know as the first white cloth hall, that Leeds was able to see off Wakefield and retain its dominance in the West Riding woolen cloth industry. In the next 60 years, the Riding's cloth production expanded dramatically, and its total share of the woolen cloth of England grew from 20% to 60%. So there was an enormous expansion here. And significantly, by 1770, the Leeds cloth merchants were handling 1/3 of all the woolen cloth exported from this country. Now, since at the time half the exports of England was woolen cloth, that meant that the merchants situated on this street and in Briggate and in fine houses and workshops around Leeds were actually handling 1/6 of the total exports of anything exported from this country. So they were tremendously wealthy, and as their wealth grew and the industry expanded, even larger cloth halls were built to supersede the first white cloth hall. Well, the other aspect to this is that notwithstanding the gentility and the wealth of Leeds cloth merchants in the early 18th century, unlike county towns which were not dissimilar in size and certainly in gentility, Leeds did not have a purpose-built assembly room in which balls could be held and in which concerts could be held. So right from the start, the first White Cloth Hall performed the dual function of being both a market hall and an assembly room. And the assemblies were held in the large back room, which we'll see in a bit, I think, across the back of the building in the 18th century. And it was only in 1755 when the second White Cloth Hall was built and this cloth hall was superseded. It was only in that year that the cloth hall became known and was solely used as the Leeds assembly rooms. Well, my conclusion about the significance of this building is quite clear, really, and that is that if Leeds had not erected this cloth hall in 1710 and seen off the challenge of Wakefield, in all probability today, Leeds would be a smallish town looking over to the great metropolitan city of Wakefield. So I think that this building is absolutely fundamental to the future growth and greatness of Leeds as it went on through the Victorian period and to today.
Thank you, Kevin. Fascinating history as always. Okay, next slide then. Jonathan, I believe we're handing back to you for the next few slides. You're just on mute, Jonathan. Yeah, that's it.
That's fantastic. Sorry. Thank you very much. Apologies. That is that which you see there, not dissimilar to the 1923 shot earlier, shows the building some 35, 40 years ago, 35 years ago, I think. Again, you'll see clear and distinctively the two outer wings with the small hipped roofs, and then the centre monopitch, which was the later infill. The drama of the deterioration from those days prior to our ownership was dramatic, and the frame you see here and a couple beyond really start to illustrate the severity of dereliction. Thank you, Jenna. I think that really the building was further beyond the image that you now see when we acquired, with the large parts of the building in the far ground, which is the southern wing, largely lost. There were some fragments and residual parts, which proved an incredibly difficult and challenging area to retain. The reality of all of that was that it made the east wing, which is the wing that you largely see as appearing relatively intact on the left-hand side, sporting the vestige of the exotic Las Vegas sign. Just showing you really sort of what we were taking on, and the severity of deterioration was enormous. Here you had a building, the wing on the left, the east wing, and the southern wing, with no internal structure. The internal layers effectively peeling away and imploding. And as you can see from the photograph there behind the Harris fencing on the left-hand side, with the infill boarding, you'd nothing really supporting the inner leaf of that internal elevation. You'll also see how the arches and the voussoirs exposed on the ground floor near ground, and also upper floor on the east wing first floor have been infilled. So you'll just see the windows on the left-hand side first floor, just with their little arches sporting some later brick infill. But a precarious set of buildings, and as the development evolved, it really did provide a degree of pressure on the significance of supporting and preserving the imperative east wing and as much of the southern wing as we possibly could. And as ever with these projects, peeling away the layers of recent times to actually try and establish what was there, and helping from some of the earlier conjecture alongside the history that we're able to pull together, and so on, that evolved the eventual scheme.
Jenna, I was going to, if you take the slides, I'll show it. So obviously from the relevance of the first white cloth hall, on one end is the building, but the relevance is also the place and the context in which it sits as part of the regeneration, revitalisation of that Kirkgate district. So this was an early diagram which just shows some of the contextual thinking about how the district can reinvent itself, really, as this is its first district. And the significance, I think one of the concerns we had when we started with the project is how impactful one building in isolation could have on the street. But I think the scale of the project, and as it's coming out of the ground now and we're seeing it, is actually, it is very significant in scale, and it's having that kind of catalytic impact together with the public realm and all the other elements of the work around this street. There is starting to change that perception. If you know the next slide, Jenna. So this is just picking up some of the principles about thinking about the reuse of the building, thinking about the scope of the street and its new role, and particularly quite significant, and we'll touch on it at the end, really, about Leeds in this kind of post-pandemic era, and about the whole experiential element of the city. So in terms of the project and the designs themselves, very earlier days, some drawings there that people may not have seen, some ideas and some brainstorming about options, some very contemporary thinking, some very traditional thinking. I think when we inherited the project, there were about 14 different variations of options of people expressed views. So our task really as lead on this was to blend conservation, the knowledge, people like yourself, Jenna, and Dr. Grady and Martin and others, together with the buildability and an economic side of it, to get to a level where on the next slide we can see effectively the results of the process of consensual decision making, consensual involvement in a very at times quite robust levels of conversation, but with a level of professionalism and commitment and openness that enables a project to be advanced. And this is showing the design intent at the start of the project. As ever, as Jonathan alluded to, in terms of what was inherited, when you peel it back, some of the elements that you think were there are not there, and some of the elements that are there you didn't think they were there. So some of the things have evolved as we've gone through the process, which again is back to the importance of the trust and openness of the dialogue as we've evolved. As we go through the next slides, you see that this is very much a partnership project. It involves there's a bunch of guys there. I'm not sure what they're particularly looking at. I was looking the wrong way, but anyway, it's a combination of the THI, which is the Townscape Heritage Initiative, and the funding of the National Lottery, administered by the City Council, together with Historic England, and the input of the Civic Trust against the private capital that we've invested in this project. So we effectively, through consensus, set a roadmap, looking to set the structure and the height of the building. Obviously inheriting, I think there was one question I think is raised before about different levels of the roofs here, but there were the timber frames that were ineffectively all over the place. So looking to align that, get a structural steel frame solution in that would hold the existing fabric and work very carefully around. There's a trick actually here on the geometry that the cupola is central, but it's just not shown as central on this model, but bringing that back into the project. This is the northern elevation, showing the recreation of effectively the shop front and the bridging of the atrium space with a new glass roof, which we'll show on some of the images later. The next slide will show the rear elevation and effectively three elements. The need for internal circulation dealt with through this new core on the left-hand side, as you see it, which is a very contemporary intervention. the recreation of the central element, and then effectively the reinterpretation of the central block, the recreation of the far western, far right-hand side set of images. So you've got this kind of triage of interesting elevations, which actually links back to, you probably align that to the custom sketch Kevin was talking about earlier in terms of the rear. Very quickly going through the building, it has a part basement. This is being repurposed and reutilized for very functional spaces. Some of it is existing voids. We have a ground floor plan that effectively recreates on your left the wings of the two buildings, together with an internal staircase in the atrium leading on to the right, which is the first floor, together with the core I was talking about earlier at the rear of the building. And the roof element and the careful integration of the glass atrium into the existing cornice detail. We've got a few sections here which is showing the internal workings of the building throughout, together with the staircase leading up from the atrium up into the first floor, and side elevation of the recreation of the 5-on-6, 6-on-5 I should say, relationship between the windows and the column details. In terms of going on to the buildability of the building, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to talk to some of the brickwork that's integral to the design.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I think the next few slides, I'm conscious that I don't want to take too much time of everybody's on this, but basically just to show that we had an amalgam of every period you could possibly imagine in terms of brick type. And one of the challenges was to establish what was effectively, as far as we could ascertain, the original form and construct of first white cloth wall bricks. So we sampled many brick types and sort of stretched the patience, I'm sure, of the building contracting team, but all very good natured, and we worked very closely with Historic England and Leeds City Council Conservation to find the best selection possible of bricks. The previous frame showed how we were dealing with the preparation cutting back to deliver the voussoirs in the brick choice that we'd settled after literally countless samples and varieties, and then how we sort of with a lot of research and sort of careful management of that inner leaf of the eastern wing, establishing the format, the historic vestiges of the imposts, which are those small springing points that you see at the shoulders of the voussoir, the arch, effectively, and then obviously that small keystone, and how we could reproduce those, which we'll show you by there. And then the mortar, we managed to find what we believed with Historic England was the earliest form of mortar within the building, and then it was a case of finding the correct mix and fragments and mix within the mortar that best suited the brick form, and again countless samples just to get what we all felt was the right finish and the right texture. Here I'm showing you the sort of the fun we also had. Traditionally on the left hand side you'll see a Flemish Bond, so how those bricks work. On the right hand side, again, a traditional monk bond, but good old first white cloth hall had its own distinctive brick bonding, as you'll see from the repetition of brick form there. So we ascertained that was the bond that the worthy masons at the time took on board. So that's what we were able to reproduce and deliver. And of course, we did the same then on the new build western wing, which we'll show you in a minute.
One of the things that was illustrated very early on the project, and we took some inspiration from Peter Breer's, his wonderful little sketch on the left is showing a cupola. And some discussions about whether there was a cupola or whether there was any evidence, and the conjecture around a possible design. Obviously, it's shown on the Cousins map that there were. But we effectively evolved a design with Peter and Kevin's assistance here to look to reintroduce this particular element to the building. I don't know if you don't want anything particularly quickly to say on this, Kevin. That
I think the important thing to say is that bells were absolutely fundamental to the conduct of business, both in the street cloth market and in the cloth halls. And effectively, the markets only ever lasted 1 hour. They started at a specific time, and effectively, everything was done in whispers. It was rather like the stock exchange, people going up and down, whispering into the merchant's ears, prices being offered and bargains being done. So no cloth market in Leeds could be without its bell. And of course, so it was absolutely fundamental and very certain that Leeds, the first white cloth hall, had one, as did the other four cloth halls that were subsequently built in Leeds. So I was desperately keen, as Jonathan knows, as I boxed his ears on many occasions, saying you can't do this without a cupola. But it's so delightful to see it there.
well, I don't think anybody could resist that argument that you're so eloquently thought there, Kevin. So on that basis, there is a cupola together with. I mean, it's a work of craftsmanship. I think it perhaps goes without saying, but I should say it is that the work of H.H. Smith as a contractor here has been exemplary craftsmanship, really, and attention to detail. Which this is a kind of a Lego puzzle set of the highest order. This is the kind of showing how the cupola then would sit within the building, which is integrated into the design, and as we through the drawing now is now in post, which is phenomenal. And then we go through the final suite of slides just to show some of the working images about the reinstatement to the columns, and the same attention to detail we had on bricks about how we could recreate the column designs with a series of samples created, looking at this recreation of the herringbone pattern. Our next slide is showing how that is been shown with 4 different options there, all of which were rejected, towards a chosen pattern of design, which is now incorporated within the columns that have been new columns that have been reinstated in the building. Trusses, of which we've got some data back from the word I can never pronounce, so I'll never have a go at it, but dating back the trusses which actually predate the building. So very important to kind of rescue these elements, to set them out, some of which were in the building, some of which were in lockers. They were all taken across to the Manchester yard to be set out. They're the guys and the conservation officer looking at what we've got and looking at recreating those back into the building. Alongside a project manager on the right there, and about the shape. So they're gone back into the building on an array for future prosperity and treated accordingly, and set out there within the that's within the east wing, is on the left. If we fly through the next slide, Jenna, we can look at how some of the detailing around how the old structure was tied to the new. Very precarious, obviously building and fabric. You can see actually there on the right, looking at how some of the existing stone columns can be retained and refaced together with the new recreated ones, whilst at the same time holding the building up from a health and safety point of view and working with a very precarious structure, which is a feat of engineering. As well, not least, the archaeological research and the old sumps and the old finds within the building, which are recorded for prosperity within the archive. This is showing then some of the images of where we are at the moment. We're due to take practical completion of the building, all being well, touch wood and all that, next month. This is the rear of the building, which relates back to the CGI I was showing you earlier with the core and the recreation of the space, the atrium. and the new plenum ceiling, which has got the lighting element to it on the left. The staircase I was showing on the sectional plan earlier, which leads up to the first floor. Just some of the technical detail going behind about the guttering and the relationship to the roof and the fixings of this glass plenum ceiling. And some of the images, in particularly to highlight there, I mean, one of the finds, we're talking about the wonders of the CGIs and setting out the roadmap, but sometimes you find things that you didn't know were there. You'll see that the windows don't exactly line up, or certainly the sills don't, and that was a later find, that some of the previous windows had been bricked up, and they were a higher level, and after through discussions with all the partners, it was felt that although it may look slightly odd, it's a nuance of the building to recreate in exactly the positions they were at, which I think is the true authentic approach to take. And then showing where we are. This is probably a week ago, coming together. Quite a bit of work to do, but the builders are getting there. And the final slides, we could probably just skip through there, showing the front, the glass elevation, the shop front and the elements, the sash windows and the design. All of these drawings and sections are available in the archive. They're also available on the public planning portal if people are interested in the technical detail. And trying to get a great picture of the building. We're unfortunately with the holdings a little bit in place, and we've got our friends at CISC now doing the great public round work outside. But hopefully within the next couple of months, the building will unveil itself to the street, and we've seen some interesting reflections of some wonderful architecture on the other side of the road in the building as well. So the impact it's having visually is quite striking.
Thanks, Mark. I think everyone will agree the change in it has been absolutely immense from the slide that we obviously saw from Jonathan at the start of the presentation. So thank you very much. Before we just get on to the last slide, obviously the building is now more or less complete. Has it been worth the effort? Is it a building that you're proud of?
We're very proud of the building for the reasons of it being an exemplar of partnership, but the fact that it is so hugely significant, as Kevin has reminded us. Optimistic about the part it might play in the wider context of Kirkgate and the regeneration of Kirkgate and Corn Exchange, and very excited about that. Inevitably, it would be misleading to say, have we done things along the way? Would we do things differently? Could it be better? The reality is, Jenna, yes, it could be all of the above, but we've done our best, and it's been extraordinarily challenging. We hope very much that, in conjunction with the great work that the city are doing, as Mark has alluded to, on this enlarged piazza, this enlarged forecourt, and the improvements of the setting that it will inherit from these new works up Kirkgate and wrapping round into Corn Exchange Square will truly give it the setting that it deserves. I think the next big thing we need to achieve, Jenna, for that part of Leeds and for the future sustainability of the building is we need to find a wonderful inspired occupier for First White Cloth that really does not only embrace and cherish that which it is, but also bring its own element of vibrancy and magic dust to Kirkgate, and to help to spearhead some of the other plans that are, I know, very much in the offing and pending.
Great. Thanks very much. Mark, we've just had a question in the chat about the roof line and why was it raised? I know you did touch on it briefly on one of your previous slides, but can you just explain that, as it was a direct question asked before the presentation?
Yes, I mean, it was effectively to get a consistent line across the piece. So levels were, as I say, kind of all over the place, and the importance of inserting a steel frame into the building to hold the historic fabric up whilst and protect it, and then the new to wrap around it was quite significant. So a consistent level had to be set. It also had to be set at a level which could accommodate the reinsertion of the trusses. So the level of the roof was set on that basis as a consistent piece across the board. You could have done inconsistent pieces probably with timber, but you unfortunately may have lost the original fabric whilst doing so.
Okay, just a couple of questions before we finish then. So obviously there's a lot of talk at the minute about city centres and how they're going to change post-COVID. You know, will office workers want to come back full time? Will retail be different? How do you see the future of buildings such as the first White Cloth Hall, the Corn Exchange and the Majestic in this so-called new world?
I think I've scribbled down some kind of points on that slide, and it's really it's wonderful to be able to do this talk online, and we can connect, and we can perhaps connect into a bigger audience that perhaps sometimes we can in person. But it would be better to do it in the Corn Exchange. It would be better to do it in the Majestic. I'm sure we'd find that it's much more exciting. It's enjoying. It's the part of the experience, and I think that's the key of why would one want to be in the city centre. And of those elements. And I think these heritage assets are part of that mix. You know, the environmental quality, meeting up with people, retailers have different, more experimental formats that cannot be replicated online, and just a great place to be. And we all know for events like Leeds Light Night, and when the city comes alive and the people come on the street, it's a great place. And some of the public realm projects that the city are driving for, at the moment, we've got a lot of roadworks in the city centre. It's a bit of kind of omelette and eggs to do, but the announcement last week about the glade around the city square is just one of those elements that just make it a compelling place to be, whether it be to live or to work or just have some fun.
And do you think the investment approach of Rushbond as a retail property company will change in the future?
I think truthfully, Jenna, I think the opportunity for repurposing of retail assets will be really exciting. It's very challenging, but this business is all, you know, has largely been about or trying to be about creative repurposing, and I think the opportunity for cherishing and enlivening the city centre where we can with partners and like minds, we're very excited and very optimistic. And as Mark has said, in terms of the sort of future for the city centre, we very much see it as the heart and the continued heart of life, and we're very optimistic, I have to say.
Great. And final question, and a bit more light-hearted to both of you, is if you were to pick one building anywhere in the world that you could own and manage, what would it be?
Well, I'm as a lover of Leeds, I think I'd perhaps say Kirkgate Markets, because I think it for us anyway signifies everything that's great about Leeds. It's got soul, it's social cohesion. It's quality. It's about quality, about belonging. It's about permanence. It's authentic, and I think it's for everybody. So for me, Kirkgate Markets.
And Mark?
Oh, I had thought of that. Mine's so different. I mean, I've formed its heritage in a different way, but I'm very fond of the Seagram building in New York City, and I think there's you know, the relevance of modern and 20th century architecture as part of place is key. I think if I had the luxury of owning that, I'd probably have a bit of surplus cash to use to put and cross-subsidise another market gem, which is the Peace Hall in Halifax. So if I'm able to say a non-Leeds project, it would probably be the Peace Hall, which also has a grand cupola that has been reinstated in. So that would be we perhaps, Jonathan, with our two markets, we'd have a venture, but that was wishful thinking perhaps on the Seagram building.
Great. Well, we're just about the hour from when we started. So thank you to Jonathan, Mark and Kevin. I hope everyone found that as useful and interesting as I did. Apologies for the technical difficulties. That is the world we live in. But I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.